I do feel somewhat of a stress on me to like generate more income for the household, which is a good thing. I do operate pretty well when my back's against the wall. And but it's like at what cost?
Another thing I think that gets overlooked from a non-monetary standpoint is just the roles and responsibilities in the house and who's taking what chores during the day. And we run into this with dual income household, who's doing what, who's doing the laundry, who's folding the kids' laundry, which side note, that is the worst thing ever is folding your kids' laundry.
Welcome to the Advisor Dads podcast, where family, finance, and real life collide. We're two financial advisors and full-time dads sharing stories, lessons, and strategies to help you make smarter decisions for your family and your future. Whether you're navigating retirement, raising kids, or just trying to make sense of the financial world, we've got you covered. Ben Tusky is a private wealth advisor and the vice president of financial planning at Sunpoint Investments. Dave Rath is a wealth advisor and the chief investment officer at Continuum Wealth Advisors. The views shared in this podcast are our own and don't necessarily reflect those of Sunpoint Investments or Continuum Wealth Advisors. Seriously, don't make financial decisions just because two dads with a microphone sound convincing. Talk to a professional that knows your situation. Some securities or strategies discussed may be holdings or recommendations for clients of Sunpoint Investments or Continuum Wealth Advisors. All right, let's get into it.
How's it going, Ben?
It is going well. It's Friday. It's March Madness Friday, and it's probably one of my. It actually might be my favorite sports day of the year, other than obviously the Eagles winning the Super Bowl. That'll always be it. But how are you doing?
It's funny because when I was younger, I lived for these 2 days. I had like a million brackets. I had knowledge of all these like obscure point guards from these mid-major schools, but I've just stopped following college basketball, and I this is actually the second year in a row that I have not done a bracket, so I feel like left out right now.
I didn't do a bracket this year. I'm not a big bracket guy. I did one last year for the first time in like several years. I There's something about the energy that you watch these. It's an energy that I feel like is hard to replicate in any other sport. They're playing as if their life depends on it.
Yeah.
And also the college atmosphere from like the fan base perspective, I don't I don't know, you don't see it anywhere else, I think in the United States as far as sports.
That's an important point, and I've always tried to put my finger on like what makes like college sports sometimes more entertaining, or you feel like there's the that they're trying harder than the pros, which probably not, but it just gets that
Yeah.
feeling. And I think the crowd has such a huge thing to do with it. If you go back and watch like old NBA games, like from when I grew up in the 90s, the crowds were just electric.
Yeah.
And that adds to the atmosphere when you're, especially when you're watching on TV. Now it's very, corporate seats cost $5,000. And so there's
Yep.
not as much of like just the intensity from the crowd. And it adds an element that it's engrossing to watch.
Absolutely. And you think about like just yesterday, I was really looking forward to yesterday, watching a bunch of games during the day and like trying to do it while I work. I didn't see but 30 seconds. Yesterday was just like a very crazy day. But I got to watch some games in the evening and just the roar when somebody makes a big three, team goes on a run. I and I say in the United States because I always remember Jokic in the NBA is like when he got asked about did the crowds ever rile you up? And he was like, I played in Serbia, brother. And they show a clip. I don't know how those stands hold all those
Yeah.
people, and the whole place is jumping up and down. And it's like, that's the environment that's so encapsulating that, yeah, you like want to be a part of it. So I think that's why I always look forward to this
Yeah.
time of year. It's really exciting.
Well, we didn't come here to talk about sports today, so let's go into the episode, and we're going to be talking about something that I think is front and center for a lot of people in our situations where the dynamic has shifted in the marriage where traditionally it was one spouse, most likely the male working, and then now as the wives start to enter into the workforce, how are we handling that as couples? What are some things that we need to consider from a monetary standpoint and a time standpoint? And so there's a lot of things that we can talk about here. And so it's funny because Ben and I are exchanging text messages about what we want to talk about in the next episode. And he actually brought something up that Monique and I were discussing internally because she works a full-time job. She works remotely though, and so gives her a lot of flexibility. We feel very very fortunate that she's able to take the kids to a doctor appointment or do anything that needs to be done during the day. And her company is pushing this evaluation and the career tracks that the employees want to be on. And she mentioned to me, she's like, is it bad that I don't want to progress in the company? I don't want to take on more responsibility that could potentially limit that flexibility. So I feel like we have a lot to talk about today. So anything that you have to say about that, Ben, and your situation?
Yeah, I don't think it's not always maybe like the wife anymore that's starting to have those thoughts. I've talked to a lot of my friends where it's like I'm comfortable with my responsibilities and I see like one or two rungs up the ladder and the life that they live, and when I have lunch with those people, like they're talking about working 60 plus hours a week. They don't see their kids, like they're all on the road all the time. And there's this reframing of life, and obviously we can we'll go into like maybe like where I had my moment, and yeah, now I think things have just like shifted. There's always going to be that like crazy work ethic crowd, but I think you're starting to see like I don't really want to do what my parents did, and some of what they did is not possible anymore. So yeah, I think let's dive into some of it, some of the some of it's math, some of it's personal preference, some of it's your own personality. So yeah, let's dive in.
Yeah, and if we go back in time to when there was traditionally a breadwinner, quote unquote, and then a homemaker. Funny story about this. I had never heard the term homemaker like, a decade or two ago. And so I was talking to somebody and they said that their wife was a homemaker. I was like, oh, she built anything around here. I did not know that homemaker was a term for that. So
A
yeah,
builder. She's a
totally egg on
builder.
my face. I mean, I took it very literally. And so there was that time period where it was, breadwinner, homemaker. And then the thing that I don't think we could ever go back to that. And this is where we talked about in previous episodes about childcare. Yes, childcare costs a lot of money, but it's a tremendous amount of strain and like a full-time, it is an unpaid full-time job for whomever that parent is that's staying home if they are that homemaker. And so I don't think that I would ever want to offload that to Monique because that's a lot of responsibility. It's a lot of stress, and it's honestly like it sometimes goes. We can take it for granted, even though I would never
Yeah.
do that. But it's easy to take that type of thing for granted.
I think it creates also this like somewhat uncontrollable stress in the household because like let's just play out the scenario where Monique is a homemaker. She's not building homes, but she's home taking care of the kids and they're not in daycare or school. And you're at work and you walk in from a day of work. The natural response is, okay, I've been doing this all day. Dave, it's your turn now.
Yeah,
Okay, but then you're like, well, when do I get a break? I just was making money for our family all day, working really hard, and like it does create this weird dynamic where you should share that responsibility, but one person has had it all day. And I think that's commonly what I most hear from folks that have somebody that's home all the time. I also, when I get in, like when I'm in those conversations, I always like to ask like not the why behind it, but like is there still fulfillment? Do you would you go back and make that same decision? And oftentimes I hear like it's stressful. It's all day. It's a around the clock job and getting out like there's no time off.
yeah.
And that's really really challenging.
And there's also the social aspect, and Monique doesn't have this as much because she works remotely, but you're engaging with people that are older than 4 or 5 years old. You know,
Yeah.
if you're a stay-at-home mom or dad and you are just basically hanging out with your kids all day, like, yeah, it's fulfilling and those are your children, but at the same time, you also want to interact with adults and have some sort of purpose outside of the family structure that you're driving towards, or that you are feel like you're participating in the financial success of your household.
And I don't think you can like totally grasp those things until you're a parent or in that situation. I I used to babysit when I was in grad school, and the family that I babysat for, the mom was a homemaker, and I would babysit sometimes during the day, and she would go out to like the tennis club, and I would always think like, you don't work. Why are you hiring a babysitter? Like you're costing more money to the household. And then of course you become a parent, you're like, dude, she needs that
Yeah.
every day. Like
Yeah.
that's that 2 hour window does so much for her mental health that just going out and socializing, playing with her friends and going out to brunch afterwards, like that does a lot for somebody's mental health. And because of the clients that I typically work with under the age of 40, 45, I've run into these situations several times where, as you mentioned before, like the economics behind it is another strain. And I probably mentioned before on the podcast of like we spent just over $30,000 last year in daycare. You start to do some of the math on like, okay, that's a net 30. What do you have to make gross to just break even on daycare? So I hear that question a lot from clients and considering somebody staying home just because the math doesn't shake out. And the first two things that I always point to is one, the social aspect. Your work is a great social outlet for you, and more so than you probably are giving it credit for. The second is the mental health. You're going out there, you're having to critically think every day at work. You have to be in a routine to get up, get yourself dressed. Maybe you have to work out in the morning because that's what your day permits. You're required to do these things. And then the third is understanding the economics. I get it. Maybe there's a break even, but you staying home with the kids for 5, 6, 7 years, depending on how many kids you have, is going to put you pretty far back in your career. And not that it has to be about any one of those three things holistically. I'm sorry, not about any one of those three things totally, but like all of it in an aggregate is really important to consider. So like if you want to be a homemaker because you want to be around your kids all the time and that's what you want to do, I love that. If it's for the economics or some other reason about math, like I think there's a way that we could probably make that work for that short window of time that we're talking about.
Yeah. And even if you're breaking even from that cost versus income perspective, you're still continuing that career trajectory or whatever that you were on. So even if you're breaking even for those daycare years, you are still setting yourself up for those now future employment years. And as I said, there's not an easy rule of thumb here because it's going to be dependent on your personal situation and your feelings. And another thing I think that gets overlooked from a non-monetary standpoint is just the roles and responsibilities in the house and who's taking what chores during the day. And we run into this with dual income household, who's doing what, who's doing the laundry, who's folding the kids' laundry, which, side note, that is the worst thing ever, is folding your kids' laundry.
Yeah, it is.
I'm like holding up this like little pair of underwear, like
Yeah. How do
folding
you
it like an
fold that?
origami.
Nobody talks
Seriously.
about that stuff.
Seriously. So yeah, it's hard to get away from the scorecard mentality when it comes to like chores around the house. And we've talked about this internally between me and Monique. You don't want it to become like who's doing more, because
Yeah.
then that just breeds like a jealousy or resentment towards the other person. And we both realize that we're in this together, right? We want to be helping the family in whatever way we can, whether it's bringing home an income or doing chores around the house. There's stuff that needs to be done. So I'm curious what how you approach like the tasks, not only what you guys do internally, but also what tasks do you outsource to like a paid service?
Yeah. So when we had Avery, we found that we were spending, and remember this is pre-COVID, so we were spending almost every Saturday. What we would do is split up the house. Like Mary Kate would take the upstairs. I would hang out with Avery downstairs. We would like lay and play. And then when she was done, she would come get Avery and I would do the first level and like just like vacuum down here in the basement. And we realized it was like every Saturday morning we spent 3 hours just like cleaning the house and all this stuff. So we outsource that now. We have like, I think that there's zero chance that she's ever going to hear this podcast, but we have a steal of a deal. I don't know how they haven't raised our costs, but so that's the only thing that we outsource today is every other week somebody comes in to just like clean our house. And that I would pay double for if I had to. Like it's $100 every other week, so it's $200 a month. Like I'd probably pay 500 or 600 for me to not have to do it.
Well, you better hope that they don't hear this podcast.
They better not. Like, hey, we heard you say that you would go
you would pay double. You
two
said
and a half. Yeah, you said it. That's the Venmo charge. So we outsource that, and then everything else, like probably the biggest gripe that we actually have is that I don't cook. I have like zero confidence in the kitchen, and usually when I'm home with the opportunity to cook and Mary Kate's not here, that means I have both kids by myself. And it just like never like I picked them up from school. I couldn't have started like meal prepping because I'm working. And I think that is like it's gotten much better, but it's been hard for like when Mary Kate's off and the kids are at school, she's home by herself so she can do like the meal prepping during the day. I don't have that luxury. I guess at lunch, like, her gripe is like she's like at lunch you could definitely cut chicken and put it in a crock pot. That is 100% true. But other than that, that's like the only thing that like she does primarily. Everything else, laundry, like if we have like we vacuum, we have two dogs, so we vacuum all the time, and then like outdoor stuff, I primarily handle, and then like anything that's related to the house, it's like, hey, somebody HVAC technician has to come in, all that stuff I'll handle. But we split things pretty evenly now. Like we both are, it's the dual income. We both have responsibilities. Like you're at work, I'm at work. We've got a grocery shop. Somebody has to do it. And like, yeah, I guess I'll take the kids after school after I pick them up. Like that's how it works. What do you and Monique do? How do you work? How do you operate? I'm curious to hear how do you guys operate with Monique working from home, and does that ever create turmoil because there is the sense that like, well, you're home, you could do that stuff.
No, it actually doesn't, and I used to be like you. I used to not. If my 20-year-old self could see like what I do in the kitchen, he would be astounded. And I'm not like some amazing chef, but I handle most of the cooking. I like doing it. It's a nice way to unwind after a day at work. I just kind of stand in the kitchen, I prep the food, I do all the cooking, and then it's on the table. I even don't mind like loading the dishwasher. It's like I actually heard Michael Batnick on Animal Spirits say this. He said like I dominate the kitchen, and I can relate to that because it's like I like being in there. I like cooking food for the family, and I just again it gives me that peace of mind where I just can focus on something other than work and just a nice transition into the family life at night. So I handle most of the cooking. Again, we try to split most things pretty evenly. I might get my dad card taken away here because I outsourced lawn maintenance. And so I know a lot of dads that love to mow the lawn and take pictures of their lawn after. I actually used to be one of those guys too. I used to take a picture of my lawn after I mow it and send it to all my friends. But it's an hour on a Saturday, and sometimes if we're away for the weekend, I don't want to come home Sunday night and then look at the lawn and be like, I got to do that after work on Monday. Yep. So we outsource that, and if we're cleaning the house, mowing the lawn, those are two things that we outsource. And beyond that, I actually don't think that I would ever like hire a maid because I read this somewhere and I can't remember where, but somebody talked about you don't want to outsource your entire life because then you're just living somebody else's life. If you just eliminate all the friction from your life, you're not really living. You're just like sitting there as somebody is feeding you grapes. Like that's not what life is about. So as much as I dislike folding my kids' clothes, I do it because it's a friction in life and I want to get it done. So you have to like strike that balance between, all right, what can we offload to somebody else and pay them for it? And then what do we still want to handle internally because, show your kids the value of hard work and doing things around the house.
I think I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about like they they knew a lot of ultra wealthy people that still would like vacuum and clean their own house. And when they asked them why, they were like, it makes me feel human. Like everything else I do in my life is so catered.
Yeah.
And they were like, this is the one task. They were like, vacuuming was the big one. Like the lion's share of whoever they were like asking these questions to that had lots of money, they were like, vacuuming is the thing that makes me feel like I am still in control and not, I don't need everybody else to do this stuff for me. And I like thought to myself, it's like, oh man, these like tasks that they just like have to get done. I don't even think about them most times. It's just like you look at the floor, you're like, all right, the vacuum's got to get run. But I don't have a chef in the house. I don't have a driver and all that stuff. So I could see how you drift too far the other way and you tip the scale of like, to your point, are you even like, what are you doing? Are
Yeah.
you actually even living? No, you're like, you're almost like a baby.
Yeah.
You have all these people just like taking care of you. What do? You take a shower on your own and that's it? That's
Throw your
pretty
clothes
odd.
on the floor, the maid comes and picks them up. Like,
Right?
yeah, it's like, yeah, you're Benjamin Buttoning back in time, and now you have a paid mom.
It's Yeah, that's exactly it. I remember thinking about it as a kid. I had said to my dad, I was like, I don't understand how nobody has invented a thing to fold your clothes yet. And that was like in the late 90s. I was like, why this is like mom does laundry every day. Why is there not a machine? He was like, I don't know. And here we are in 2025 and there's still not.
I made a comment about that on Twitter one time. I said, "You can have your AI. I'll take a machine that folds clothes." And somebody responded that there is actually is one, but I think I looked it up and the reviews were terrible. Like this thing never
Okay.
works. And again,
Yeah.
I don't think you're ever going to avoid that unless you hire like manual labor or until like the robots now are humanoids and can do that stuff for you. But overarching theme is that you don't want to eliminate every single stressor from your life because yeah, then you're just living this pampered lifestyle and you are just not even a human being. You're just a baby that is being taken care of by everything and everyone.
Yeah, and I think about this too in the last piece, like just popped in my head, like the movie Click with Adam Sandler,
Yep.
where like if every time you had something boring or something you didn't want to do and you could just like fast forward through it, you would like just like that and snap a finger, you'd be at the end of your life.
Yeah.
And you'd be questioning the whole time, like, what did I just do? Like part of the growth is like going through these monotonous tasks and doing things that might seemingly be boring sometimes, but or like you don't want to do it. But I always think the things that you don't want to do that you do anyway like creates the right discipline for when there's something big that you don't want to do, but you just do it because you're like, hey, that's who I am and that's what I have to do. I
I
think
think
that
he
stuff's
drew
really important.
inspiration for that movie from the scene from Billy Madison where the kid says, "I can't wait till I go to high school."
Oh, stay here as
He's like,
long as you can.
he was like, "Wow, that actually that I can make a movie out of
I could
that."
make a movie out of this one
Yeah,
scene.
yeah. So I don't know if you have anything else on that, or if you want to bring up anything that you and Mary Kate deal with. But I think that as couples are either getting into this stage of their lives where they're deciding to have kids and then designating responsibilities to whomever, are there any things that you guys put in place that like helps you when that turmoil does strike? Because we're both married and we know that
Yeah.
that happens. Like, is there anything that you guys do where you just kind of reset and touch base with each other?
Yeah, I mean, I don't do well with like silence and like I can't hold a grudge. It actually takes too much. It like drains me of energy. It's like even when things like aren't going well, usually I'm just like, okay, hey, we gotta talk. Like gotta we don't have to agree, but we need to definitely like respect each other's opinions here on whatever the situation is. We do have pretty good cadence. It's not like hard and fast for the finances, but I have like a pretty simple Excel document that we check in on every 2 weeks. It's like usually right like, all right, hey, we got paid. How do we want to do this? And the decision making for and Dave and I talked about this pre-show, is over the summer, Mary Kate this year and last year, she's an ER nurse, is going to go down to work in 2 days a week instead of 3 days a week. So obviously there's a financial constraint that comes along with that. And last year we kind of made that decision in late May, and it was like, okay, there was no savings sat on the sideline to make up for the lost income. But I understand it. And this year it's actually been much more challenging. As of recently, it's been very challenging. As the kids have started to get older, like Mary Kate leaves for work at like 4:30 in the morning. She goes to the gym beforehand. She doesn't get home till 8:30. The kids are already asleep. So those days that she works, she doesn't see the kids at all. Now that the kids are getting older, especially in the past 2 weeks, it's put a lot of strain on her emotionally for them. Like, you work tomorrow, and they start like crying or they get emotional about it. Like, so it started to put some strain on things to say like, she started to question, what am I doing? And so we had talked about it in January already of like, hey, why don't you go back to the 2 days a week over the summer? We only do like a part-time summer camp thing with the kids anyway. You love taking the kids to the pool. You'll have plenty of time over the summer. And then I think like when we get to the fall, let's reevaluate what life looks like. So we've definitely been better communication wise. But I do feel somewhat of a stress on me to like generate more income for the household, which is a good thing. I do operate pretty well when my back's against the wall. And but it's like, at what cost? Like, do I now make it so I'm not around as often? Because I do think that that is a factor here. I'm boringly around. I don't miss anything. I work remotely, like, and the kids are like, Dad, you're always here. And it's like, I understand, like, they don't mean to be offensive by making that comment. I actually take it as a compliment. Like, yeah, I've made sure that I'm available for everything. But when Dad's available for everything, and Mom is at a lot of things, but not as around as much as Dad, that's actually the big issue that we've been running into, and we don't really have a good answer for yet, other than like Mary Kate changing jobs and doing something that's like more traditional hours.
Yeah, those types of employments where the hours are either a night shift or anything outside of the traditional structure of the day, it does put strain on people because, as you mentioned, like, your kids are like, Dad, you're always around. Mom
Yep.
mom has to go to work for the entire day tomorrow. And there's probably a feeling of guilt that creeps in on her end. And
Oh yeah.
you also don't want to, as we talked about earlier, you don't want to now keep a running tally in your head of like, all right, you worked all day, and I stayed home with the kids, and now you owe me, so I'm going to go out with the
Yeah.
boys on the weekend.
Yep.
That is like a recipe for disaster. And you, I think that like the biggest takeaway from all this is you realize that you're in this together, you're a team, and once you start comparing yourself to your spouse and what that spouse is or is not doing, assuming that your spouse is in it with you, like, deadbeat parents don't apply here, but once you start comparing yourself to your spouse and saying like, well, I did this and they didn't do it that day, and so now it's like a debit that they owe, or
Right.
yeah. So the, that just leads to disaster. And so the biggest takeaway from all this is make sure that you're in it with your spouse together as a team, have regular conversations, but then don't go down the path of thinking that it needs to be 50-50, because it's never going to be 50-50.
Right.
And just knowing that each person is doing their own part is like the biggest thing.
Yeah, I think that, like, you always hear quotes, I feel like, too late for things that like, you're like, man, if I only heard that years ago. But I also agree to the adage, like, you just wouldn't have applied it years ago. Like, you needed the experience. But unspoken expectations are premeditated disasters. And it's like, you gotta put this up. If you have an expectation, and I will say that, like, we've definitely gotten much better at it of saying, like, hey, like, I expect if you're home, like my wife will say, like, I expect when you're home with the kids all day, I shouldn't come home to a disaster of a house. They can help you clean up, you can run the vacuum, you can, like, that stuff can get done. And as they're getting older, it's getting easier. So then that, like, it's that stuff where we had to sit and have that conversation of, you're not communicating your expectations here, and then
Mm-hmm.
you come home and you explode
Yeah.
because you're like, this stuff's not done. And yeah, it's those things. Over communicating, we feel like it's just has done wonders.
Yeah, that's such a good takeaway and probably a good spot to end. And I actually really like that quote, so I'll probably steal that in the future. But it's so true. When you are internalizing a lot of things and you are setting expectations for your spouse that you're not verbalizing, it's
Yeah,
unfair to them because they have no idea. It hits them like a brick wall when you explode. And so if you can, yeah, have those open lines of communication and talk through what the expectations are from either side, that can only lead to better things.
totally agree.
All right, well, another episode in the books. Hopefully anybody listening got some good takeaways here. Learn from our mistakes. Don't ask somebody which house they built if they're a homemaker. So, yeah, hopefully you guys got some good takeaways, and make sure to subscribe, like us, all that stuff that helps spread the word.
See you in 2 weeks.
Take care.